Hi-de-ho, this is Annabelle and Sarah. Welcome back to Navigating the Shift. We are looking a little bit at politics, even though we are really tired of it. But we're going to do a little bit on that this time because it's about time we did. So, Sarah, you've got a little bit about Biden and Trump. What's going on there?
And impeachment and all that, right? And I believe you're going to talk about Greta.
Yes.
The little
the girl
world.
In plants.
Yes, that one. So I don't understand the strategy of the Democrats going for impeachment because they can't do it. You cannot impeach a president unless the Senate approves that. And they won't because it's a Republican Senate. They'll never get the votes. The far left part of the Democratic Party has been pushing for impeachment. And Nancy Pelosi, as the Speaker of the House, finally just sort of caved and said, okay, we are starting an impeachment inquiry, which is like, woo, because you know what? A whistleblower talked to us that Trump did some really impeachable things with the president of the Ukraine. And then Trump says,
we don't know who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know who the whistleblower is. And it turns out the whistleblower never heard the conversation or saw the transcript. Somebody else talked to him about it. So Trump says, okay, I'll just declass the transcripts of the conversation. And it comes out and it's very nice. He's very polite and they're flattering each other. And he says at one point, I think a lot of people here would like to look into that, about that judge being fired. And what was it about Biden's part of that? Could you look into that? And he goes, yeah, I can look into that. And then he said something about he was going to have William Barr contact him, but evidently he never did ask Barr to contact him, and Barr never did contact him. And he mentioned something about Rudy Giuliani as well. And Giuliani's been speaking recently about that he's got lots of juicy evidence against the Bidens. So basically, I think Biden's no longer in the running. But
doesn't sound like it. So he's been bragging about stuff, hasn't he?
Yeah. So what happened was when Biden was vice president, his son was put on a board of a Ukrainian company for something he had no experience in, and he was being paid $50,000 a month. So when at one point that company's a little bit dicey, so this prosecutor, this judge was going after them and investigating that company. So Biden went on Council for Foreign Relations show and bragged about how he said, you need to fire that guy, that prosecutor, because otherwise you're not getting the $1 billion. And he said, I'm leaving here in about 6 hours. And if he's not fired by then, you don't get the money. And they replied, you can't do that. It's the president. He goes, no, I can do that. So the guy got fired and they got the money. So that's really bad. All Trump did is said, a lot of people want you to look at this.
Yeah.
So it's that standard thing of blame the other guys of what you're doing.
Yeah. Projection,
deflection, yeah. Yeah. So there was nothing in that conversation that was what they call quid pro quo, meaning he didn't say, if you don't do this, I will do this, or if you do this, I will do this. There was none of that. It was just a friendly suggestion. So, and also the Ukrainian president said, I never felt pushed. I never felt pressured. He said the word push, but Trump on his press conference said he thought he meant pressured. So it's all going to just go away, and they're going to scream for impeachment, and they're going to do their inquiry. I mean, the only strategy that I read is a possibility is once they have officially announced they're in the inquiry, which means they aren't actually, they're just looking into possibly making articles of impeachment. That doesn't mean they're actually doing it, right? But they're trying to get some information from some people on Trump's side, and they're hoping that this will force more cooperation with what the Democrats want. That's the only strategy I can think of. But if you look at it, I saw a cute meme of, the whistleblower who turned this in, we found him, and it's a picture of Trump with a fake mustache. The idea being this is strategically wonderful for President Trump.
It is. It makes them look so idiotic, doesn't it? So
and it makes them scream, Biden and Biden this and Biden that, and people are now looking into it and going, oh.
It's a bit like when the chooks get upset and they go, it feels like that to me. And And you go in to see what's going on, and they're all just standing there, and there's nothing to be upset about. It feels like that to me. So they've been going on and on and on about, Russian collusion all this time. Then that got proved wrong. Oh, okay, we'll go find something else. Surely people can see what's going on, or
people don't. People are starting to. I mean, I think this is going to be another one of those events that starts opening people's eyes.
People are just going to have to go, wait a minute. Yeah.
You could, if you actually read the conversation.
That's it. Yeah.
You go, oh, there isn't
Nothing
really
there.
anything there. But if all you do is read people's commentaries or analysis from the mainstream media, they were like, oh, and then he did this, and it was obvious. This is the way Trump works. I've worked with him a long time. He doesn't say anything outright. He just swivels it in, and yeah, there you go. I don't know. I think it's going to backfire for him.
Well, hopefully it'll just open up more and more people each step of the way. More and more people will turn their heads at the ones pointing the finger instead of following the finger. Okay.
Follow the fingers that are pointing back instead of the one that's pointing
That's
out.
it. 3 fingers pointing back, not the one pointing forward. Okay. Greta is the other thing as well. So this is the fun thing about sharing information on the internet now. Of course, there is disinformation, but it's very quickly disproven as far as I can see. Now, this happens much faster now than what it used to, when people are looking for somebody pops up in the media, and everybody now, instead of just listening to them going, oh my God, they're so amazing, instead of that, people are going, why is that person there? Why did the media put them there? Who wrote the speech? Who's standing behind them? And then they go off and do all this amazing homework. It's not interesting to me necessarily to go into investigating these things, but what comes back out of it just makes it such a great show. So with Greta, I'm looking at one here and talking about her handler. So she has a young girl who's in her 20s.
Yes.
Her name is Louisa Marie Neubauer, I think it is. And she is a member, quite out in public, a member of One Foundation, ONE, which is managed by Bono, Bill Gates, who currently has a class action being taken against him for sterilizing a whole lot of thousands of children in India, and George Soros, who is apparently further up the dark hierarchy than Clinton, if you haven't heard of him before. So if that's the handler, and this is an autistic child, it kind of reminds me also of that 11-year-old autistic boy who's dancing in drag at nightclubs while men throw money at him like a whore to prove their point and get their agenda across. Autistic kids are malleable by the looks of things. It just seems like it does not feel good at all. Does not feel good. It does not feel like these kids are saying what they really want to say themselves. That they're taught to do these things. So that kind of upsets me. We'll see how we go. I wrote an article about Greta's thing, especially as all the big climate change protests have been happening. Now, in Australia, people don't do a lot of protesting. There's this really famous comedian here called George Smilovich, who I worked with for a while on one of his one-man shows. And in the show, he was talking about his history, and he was saying, my parents came from Cuba, I think. And he said they moved to Australia because the Australians are too lazy to have a revolution. and so they stayed because there was no revolution here, because in Cuba it was certainly all on. I think actually they moved to another country in between, and then that one had a revolution as well, so they chose Australia. But we went out, thousands of people went out with their placards for climate change and all had their photos taken. Here I am, on the social media, here I am getting my photo taken, and here I'm doing my bit. And I kind of wrote an article about how I just don't think these things make any difference. If you have a country that does more than just one day, takes the day off work and waves their placard and go home again for dinner, it's pointless. But it's not until you get serious protesters who are going to scream until they get what they want, like the yellow vests in Paris, Philippines, Venezuela, Brazil, Hong Kong.
Kong.
They are pushing. They don't care if the media is there or not, because social media will cover them otherwise, and they will keep going until they get what they want. Whereas Australia, we're all back home again now. So I thought, right, well, if Australia is not going to push to stop these huge mining companies coming into our country and dragging massive amounts of water into their process for their mining, which is leaving all the farmers drought-ridden, which is where we get our food from, and driving them bankrupt, then we've got to do something ourselves. So I thought, well, I'm not going to plait my hair and go out and start doing speeches like Greta. But what I can do is smaller things. And so I started putting a little list in my article of things to do. You know, you can go and pick up a bag of rubbish. You can go and write to your council. Don't do it on email. They're too easy to delete. Saying there's too much concrete here and nobody walks over it. Let's dig it up and put some plants in. There's a big patch of grass here that you have to keep on mowing. Nobody uses it for playtime. Let's change that to a food forest or something like that. And if you can do that persistently, that doesn't take a lot of time. If you can send physical letters and inundate them with physical letters saying you've got to do something about this, then your local councils are much more likely to do it. This is something we can do on a little scale, but if a whole lot of us did it, it would move things very quickly.
I like that idea.
Yeah. And then you know that you can go to bed at night and know that you've done something. You have completed something. You've achieved a purpose. You've done something that's great for the planet, rather than sitting around talking about it. So I wrote this article, and suddenly on Facebook, some people are very supportive, and then you'll get, a scientist who raves on, well, where's your evidence about what you're saying? You're not looking. We've put years into these computer models, and where's your evidence? I want to see your evidence. And I wrote back and I said, there is nothing that I can present to you, even the word of God, that will convince you to change your mind. So let's just start cleaning up the planet and then we'll see what happens in 20 years. And then he started being offended that I said, no, we're not going to meet in 20 years. You should debate with a scientist. I said, so I'm just about to post my picture of the rubbish I picked up this morning. This is what I did today. What about you? I'm too busy to debate with climate scientists. I'm actually out there doing it. So I think it's an example I want to push. And it's interesting that you get these knee-jerk reactions along the way, which has been happening a bit over these last couple of weeks, a lot more than before. I don't know why. Just getting lighter, I guess, isn't it? Bubbles to the surface. Yeah. So if we look at the more of the spiritual evolution of people, that you just see where the triggers are in them, and don't be offended by when they throw themselves at you, mortally offended that you said something. It means that something's bubbling up, right?
Right. Yeah, I think one of the saddest things of what's going on with this whole climate panic is that there's a whole generation of children who are terrified. It's just fear-mongering.
It is. And she says that, I want you to be scared.
I want you to be scared. I watched it, but I had to stop because I was getting so angry that this child was being used that way, right? I wasn't angry about climate change. I don't believe in their model. Carbon dioxide, isn't it? We'll link to the Suspicious Observers video about why that's an incorrect. The models they're using aren't real. They aren't complete. But I just feel like I think this poor child has been brainwashed. Probably. I mean, it's probably a multi-generational, Illuminati family with the connections. With the mom's a famous singer, and the grandfather was an actor with Disney, and we know about Disney these days.
Yeah, there was a thing about her father, a chemist, Svante Arrhenius. I'm not very good at my Swedish. The founder of the global warming scam was a colleague of Alfred Nobel, who was a Russian Rockefeller. Right. After his death, director of the Nobel Institute. So, there's connections there with her that do not look pure, you might say. So, and I also in my one, I mentioned, I didn't actually say specifically where my evidence came from because I thought I'm just really not going to go into that because they'll try and pick it all apart. But The Fractal Time book by Greg Braden talks about how they took ice core samples at one of the poles, I think it was the Arctic, and they got about 300,000 years worth of ice.
Right.
And they could see very clearly a pattern within it that every 25,000 years this happens. The weather goes crazy for about 40 years, and then it settles down again every 25,000 years, which is connected to the larger cycle that our solar system, our sun with all its little planets, going around the larger cycle, and it goes then. So I likened it in my article to that old story from the 1800s of missionaries that were, I don't know if they were in Africa or somewhere where there were cannibals, and they'd been caught and were about to be eaten. And they knew that there was a solar eclipse coming up, so they threatened. They said, we're going to block out the sun if you do anything to us. So they wanted to show the natives that they were gods. And it worked. The solar eclipse happened, the natives got all freaked out and suddenly started treating them like gods. So you could get them, it sounds funny to us, but really it's the same situation on a smaller scale, right? You've got the people that are not informed. They don't know what's going on, and so they're easily misled. And that's what it feels like to me, this whole thing, that if the scientists are using their computer models with however long the temperatures have been measured, which is maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years, that's all, then of course it looks like it's going up and it's a disaster. Of course it does. But if you look at 200,000 years, it's a very predictable pattern, and it will settle down. So it started in the 80s. It should be over within 10 or 15 years.
Interesting. The other thing is the way they manipulate the graphs. They'll show, here we are. It's 300 parts per million or 200 parts per million at the very bottom, at like where zero should be in the vertical part of the graph. And then it goes, it's all the way up to almost 400 parts per million now, talking about carbon dioxide. And it looks like, oh my God. But if you just step back and go all the way back to zero, it's just a gradual, it's just like this.
Yeah.
And then if we go back way, way back in time, historically, it's been up to almost 8,000 parts per million.
Wow.
The graph is like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then, at the end, the last 100 years, it's like, wait, this is about as little carbon dioxide as we've ever had. And the fact of the matter is that carbon dioxide is food for plants. It's contributing to greening of the planet.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
carbon
monoxide
the climate
is the problem.
Changing, but it's not because of carbon dioxide.
No, carbon
so don't worry
monoxide.
about your carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Carbon monoxide that comes out of cars and trucks, that is a problem. That's what you pump back into the car if you want to commit suicide. It's really bad for you. And so I think that's where the plants are going to be helpful until we get our 0 point energy. And I think that's where I was heading with my article as well, to add more vegetation. We need it to get rid of that deadly carbon monoxide.
So I can think of when I moved here, there was just a plum tree in the back and a row of trees along the side and some weeds. And now it's all full of plants and a vegetable garden and vines growing up and everything. So I'm greening my little area.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I've just been learning all about permaculture over the last few months, which I know has been around for ages, but I'm not really a gardener. I'm a city girl, but I'm so fascinated by it and how you can make such rich soil and that keeps the moisture in it. So it doesn't matter if it doesn't rain that often, and it can survive droughts.
Exactly.
And the plants keep popping up year after year, and you mix up all your vegetables and fruit with plants that smell strong, so that the insects that will eat your fruit won't do it. I don't know if it'll work with bats. We have a lot of fruit bats. Not sure if that'll work, but I just think it's fabulous, and there's so much more we can do here. That the amount of time our local council spends mowing the grass, trimming the hedges, to be beautiful shapes. It's so much time. If they've got that much time to spend, then let's spend it in a permaculture way and make a much richer vegetation.
I like that idea. I have one of my beds is a hugelkultur, which is hill culture. So I did that, dug way down deep and put some old branches that I'd cut off, pruning off trees and old pieces of wood that are starting to break down at the bottom, and then smaller twigs and some leaves that had just been in a pile for almost a year and really breaking down, and then all the way up to potting soil at the top. And it's wonderful because as the stuff underneath breaks down, one thing it does is it releases nutrients, but it also is heat. So it extends your growth year.
Oh, right.
Right, and it also holds moisture. So if you have a board, a bunch of wood or old branches, whatever, that have absorbed a lot of moisture in the winter, it like gradually releases it in the summertime. So it's a wonderful experiment. I had a very successful growth of, I put tomatoes and potatoes in there, and homegrown potatoes taste better than store-bought ones, I just have to say.
Is that right?
Yes,
I want to try that
surprising.
now. I went and bought some organic carrots at the local markets. Oh my goodness, they're like what they used to taste like when I was a kid. You know, because the other ones, they're so, I don't know if they're bleached or, I don't know, but supermarket carrots, they taste disgusting all the way through. I thought it might just be because they were sprayed or bleached, or, you know, when they knock all the dirt off. But I think there's some, it just tastes awful all the way to the center. Yeah. Whereas these organic ones just taste fantastic.
My mom always taught to always buy organic carrots because carrots pull toxins out of the soil. Organic gardeners, if they want to convert a conventional space to organic, they'll plant a bunch of carrots to pull the impurities out, clean the soil. So,
cool. Okay, no more supermarket carrots for me. Yeah, and they got like 90% more nutrients or something than supermarket ones as well. Fantastic. Exactly. All right, so that's us for this week, isn't it?
Yes, we're done. Thanks for joining us.
Any comments, put them in below, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.